The morning sun filtered through the crystal chandeliers of the Whitmore estate, casting rainbow prisms across the marble floors that 8-year-old Emma loved to chase with her bare feet. She had been living in this magnificent mansion for 3 years now, ever since Marcus Whitmore had taken her in after her parents died in a car accident. Marcus wasn't just her guardian. He had become the father she desperately needed, filling the void left by tragedy with warmth, patience, and unconditional love. Emma skipped down the grand staircase, her pigtails bouncing with each step, wearing her favorite yellow sundress that Marcus had bought her during their last shopping trip together. The house felt different this morning, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. Perhaps it was the way the new maid, Isabella, had been acting lately, or maybe it was the strange tension she sensed whenever Isabella and Marcus were in the same room. Isabella had started working at the estate 2 months ago, replacing Mrs. Henderson, who had retired after 20 years of faithful service. Where Mrs. Henderson had been warm and grandmotherly, always ready with fresh cookies and bedtime stories, Isabella was cool and distant. She was beautiful, with long dark hair and striking green eyes, but there was something about her smile that never quite reached those eyes, something that made Emma's stomach feel funny whenever she looked at her. Marcus was in his study, as he was every morning at this time, reviewing business documents and preparing for another day of managing his vast empire. At 45, he was one of the youngest self-made millionaires in the city, having built his fortune through a combination of shrewd investments, innovative technology ventures, and an uncanny ability to predict market trends. But despite his wealth and success, nothing meant more to him than Emma. She had brought light back into his life after years of focusing solely on business, reminding him what truly mattered. Emma burst through the study doors without knocking, as she always did, knowing that Marcus would never be too busy for her. He looked up from his papers with a genuine smile, the kind that transformed his usually serious face into something warm and approachable. "Good morning, sunshine," he said, pushing back from his mahogany desk. "You're up early today." "Marcus," Emma said, her voice carrying an urgency that immediately caught his attention. She rarely used such a serious tone, and he could see worry clouding her usually bright blue eyes. "I need to tell you something important." He gestured for her to come closer, and she climbed onto his lap, something that had become their morning ritual. Marcus wrapped his arms around her, feeling the familiar surge of protective love that always overwhelmed him when she was near. "What's troubling you, sweetheart?" he asked gently, smoothing down her hair. Emma took a deep breath, as if gathering courage for what she was about to say. "The new maid has your keys, Marcus. I saw her with them this morning, and she was acting really strange." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. His keys weren't just any keys. They included access to his private safe, his office building, and several security areas throughout the house. He kept them on his person at all times, never letting them out of his sight. The only time he removed them was when he slept, and even then, they stayed on his nightstand. "Are you sure about this, Emma?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm despite the alarm bells ringing in his head. "When did you see her with them?" "This morning, really early," Emma explained, her small hands fidgeting with the buttons on his shirt. "I woke up because I heard noises in the hallway. When I peeked out, I saw Isabella coming out of your room with something shiny in her hand. She was being really quiet and looking around like she didn't want anyone to see her." Marcus's blood ran cold. Isabella had no business being in his private quarters, let alone handling his keys. He had specifically told all staff that his bedroom and personal study were off-limits unless there was an emergency. The violation of his privacy was disturbing enough, but the implications of her having access to his keys were far more serious. "Where did you see her go after that?" he asked, his mind already racing through the possibilities of what she might be planning. "She went downstairs toward the kitchen, but then I heard the back door open and close," Emma replied. "I was scared to follow her because she looked really angry about something. Her face was all scrunched up, and she was muttering under her breath." Marcus gently lifted Emma from his lap and stood up, his businessman instincts kicking into high gear. If Isabella had taken his keys, she could access virtually anything in the house or his business properties. The potential for theft, corporate espionage, or worse was enormous. He needed to investigate immediately, but he also needed to ensure Emma's safety. "Emma, I want you to go to your room and stay there until I come get you," he said, kneeling down to her eye level. "Lock your door and don't open it for anyone except me. Can you do that for me?" Emma nodded solemnly, understanding from his tone that this was serious. "Are we in danger, Marcus?" "I don't know yet, sweetheart, but I'm going to find out," he replied, kissing her forehead. "I promise I'll keep you safe, no matter what." As Emma hurried upstairs to her room, Marcus quickly checked his nightstand. His keys were indeed missing. The spare set was locked in his office safe. But if Isabella had somehow gained access to those as well, the situation would be even more dire. He grabbed his phone and considered calling the police, but decided he needed more information first. False accusations against an employee could have serious legal ramifications, and he wanted to be absolutely certain before taking that step. Marcus made his way through the house, noting details he had previously overlooked. Isabella's behavior had been odd lately, now that he thought about it. She had asked several questions about his business schedule, his travel plans, and the security system. At the time, he had attributed her curiosity to normal employee interest in household routines, but now those conversations took on a more sinister tone. He found Isabella in the kitchen, preparing what appeared to be a normal breakfast. She looked up as he entered, and he studied her face carefully, looking for any signs of guilt or deception. She was composed, professional, and gave no indication that anything was amiss. "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore," she said with her usual polite smile. "Would you like your coffee now, or shall I wait until after your meeting?" "I don't have any meetings scheduled this morning," Marcus replied carefully, watching her reaction. A flicker of something passed across Isabella's face, too quick to identify, but it was enough to confirm his suspicions that something wasn't right. "Isabella, I seem to have misplaced my keys," he said, maintaining a casual tone. "You haven't seen them anywhere, have you?" "No, sir, I haven't," she replied without hesitation. "Would you like me to help you look for them?" The ease with which she lied was chilling. Marcus realized he was dealing with someone far more dangerous than a simple opportunistic thief. This level of deception suggested planning, possibly involving others, and potentially much more serious consequences than he had initially imagined. "That won't be necessary," he said. "I'm sure they'll turn up." Marcus excused himself and immediately went to his office to call his head of security, James Morrison. James had been with him for over a decade, handling everything from background checks on employees to coordinating security for high-profile business meetings. If anyone could help him navigate this situation safely, it was James. "James, I need you here immediately," Marcus said as soon as the call connected. "We have a situation with one of the staff members, and Emma may be in danger." "I'll be there in 15 minutes, James replied without asking for details. He knew Marcus well enough to understand that any threat involving Emma was to be taken with the utmost seriousness. While waiting for James to arrive, Marcus decided to do some investigating of his own. He accessed his home security system from his computer, reviewing the footage from the past few days. What he saw made his blood run cold. Isabella had indeed been in his room that morning, but that wasn't the worst of it. The recordings showed her making copies of documents from his desk, photographing files with her phone, and even accessing his computer when he wasn't home. She had been systematically gathering information about his business operations, financial accounts, and personal life for weeks. But the most disturbing footage was from the previous evening. Isabella could be seen letting someone into the house through the back door after everyone had gone to bed. The figure was male, dressed in dark clothing, and they had spent over an hour in Marcus's study, copying files and examining his personal belongings. The violation felt like a physical assault, and Marcus realized that Emma and he had been sleeping peacefully upstairs while strangers ransacked their home. James arrived exactly on time, his professional demeanor immediately putting Marcus at ease. At 52, James was a former military man with extensive experience in personal protection and corporate security. His presence alone made the situation feel more manageable. "Tell me everything," James said, settling into the chair across from Marcus's desk. Marcus explained Emma's discovery, his missing keys, and the security footage he had just reviewed. James listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions, his expression growing more serious with each detail. "This isn't random theft," James concluded. "Someone specifically targeted you, and Isabella is either working with them or for them. The level of access she's gained suggests this has been planned for months, possibly longer." "What do you think they're after?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Your business is worth hundreds of millions, and you have access to information that could be valuable to competitors or foreign interests, James replied. But given the personal nature of their intrusion into your home, this feels more targeted. Someone wants to hurt you specifically, not just steal from you. Marcus thought about his business dealings over the past few years. He had made enemies, as any successful businessman does, but he couldn't think of anyone who would go to such elaborate lengths for revenge. Then again, he realized he might not even know who his real enemies were. What's our next move? Marcus asked. First, we need to ensure Emma's safety, James said. Then we need to find out who Isabella really is and what she's planning. I have contacts who can run a deep background check and trace her real identity. In the meantime, we need to act normal so she doesn't realize we're onto her. The next few hours were among the most difficult of Marcus's life. He had to maintain his normal routine while knowing that a dangerous criminal was living in his house, potentially planning something that could harm Emma. Every time he saw Isabella, he had to resist the urge to confront her immediately, knowing that patience was crucial for their safety. Emma, bless her heart, followed his instructions perfectly. She stayed in her room, entertaining herself with books and puzzles, occasionally texting him to check in. Her trust in him was absolute, and he was determined not to let her down. James's investigation moved quickly. Within hours, he had disturbing news. Isabella Martinez isn't her real name, James reported during a private meeting in Marcus's study. Her real name is Catherine Volkov, and she has connections to organized crime. She's been arrested twice for identity theft and fraud, but never convicted. Someone with serious resources is backing her. Volkov, Marcus repeated, the name triggering a memory. I've heard that name before. You should have, James said grimly. Dmitry Volkov was the businessman you outbid for the Riverside Development Project 2 years ago. He lost over $50 million when that deal fell through, and word is he blamed you personally for his financial troubles. Marcus remembered now. Dmitry Volkov had been furious about losing the Riverside project, making threats and accusations of unfair business practices. Marcus had dismissed him as a sore loser, but apparently, Volkov had been planning his revenge ever since. So Catherine is what, his daughter? His niece? Marcus asked. His daughter, James confirmed. And based on what we've learned about their family's history, they don't forget grudges. This isn't just about money anymore. It's personal. The realization that he was dealing with organized crime made Marcus's protective instincts toward Emma even stronger. These weren't ordinary criminals who would be satisfied with theft. They were people who viewed violence as a legitimate business tool. We need to call the police now, Marcus said, reaching for his phone. Wait, James said, holding up a hand. If we move too quickly, Catherine might panic and do something desperate. We need to be strategic about this. What do you suggest? Let me position my team around the property first, James explained. Then we can confront her with backup in place. If she has accomplices nearby, we need to be ready for anything. Marcus agreed, though every minute that passed felt like an eternity. He checked on Emma frequently, making excuses to visit her room and ensure she was safe. She seemed to sense his anxiety, asking several times if everything was okay, and he did his best to reassure her without lying outright. As evening approached, James gave him the signal that his team was in position. It was time to confront Catherine and end this nightmare. Marcus found Catherine in the dining room, setting the table for dinner as if it were any other normal evening. The sight of her calmly going about her duties while planning who knows what against his family filled him with rage. Catherine, he said, using her real name deliberately. She froze, a plate halfway to the table, and Marcus saw her entire demeanor change. The mask of the polite, professional maid fell away, replaced by something cold and calculating. I was wondering when you'd figure it out, she said, straightening up and facing him directly. Took you longer than I expected. What do you want? Marcus asked, keeping his voice steady despite the anger coursing through him. What I want is for you to suffer the way my father suffered, Catherine replied, her voice filled with venom. You destroyed his life, took everything he worked for, and now it's your turn. Your father lost a business deal, Marcus said. That's not the same as destroying someone's life. That business deal was everything to him, Catherine shot back. He lost his company, his reputation, his health. He died of a heart attack 6 months ago, and it's your fault. Marcus felt a chill of understanding. This wasn't just about revenge for a business loss. This was about a daughter's grief and misplaced blame. Catherine genuinely believed he was responsible for her father's death, which made her far more dangerous than a simple criminal motivated by money. "I'm sorry for your loss," Marcus said carefully, "but bankrupting me won't bring your father back." "No, but it will make me feel better," Catherine replied with a cold smile. "And I'm not just going to bankrupt you. I'm going to take everything you care about, starting with that little girl upstairs." The threat against Emma shattered Marcus's self-control. He lunged toward Catherine, but she was ready for his reaction. She pulled a gun from beneath her apron, pointing it directly at his chest. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," she said calmly. "My associates are already in the house, and they have very specific instructions about what to do if anything happens to me." Marcus's blood turned to ice. Despite James's precautions, Catherine's people had somehow gotten past their security. Emma was upstairs, possibly already in danger, and he was trapped in a standoff with an armed woman who had nothing left to lose. "What do you want?" he asked again, forcing himself to remain calm. "First, you're going to transfer $50 million to an account I'll provide," Catherine said. "Then you're going to sign over the Riverside property to a company I control. After that, we'll see how generous I'm feeling. And if I refuse?" Catherine's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. "Then you'll discover that some things are more valuable than money." The implication was clear. Emma's safety was the leverage Catherine intended to use against him, and Marcus realized he would pay any price to keep her safe. "I'll need access to my computer," Marcus said. "The transfers you're talking about require multiple security protocols." "Of course they do," Catherine replied. "That's why we've been studying your systems for months. My technical expert is already upstairs with your little girl, making sure she stays quiet while we complete our business." Marcus's vision went red with rage. The thought of strangers in Emma's room, threatening her, was more than he could bear. He started toward the stairs, but Catherine's voice stopped him. "I wouldn't recommend that," she said, raising the gun. "My partner has very specific instructions about what to do if anyone tries to interfere with his work. If you hurt her, I'll kill you," Marcus said, meaning every word. "You're not in a position to make threats," Catherine replied. "But I will say this. As long as you cooperate, the girl won't be harmed. Cross me, and she'll pay the price for your stubbornness." Marcus forced himself to think clearly. James and his team were somewhere on the property, but they obviously hadn't been able to prevent Catherine's associates from entering the house. He needed to buy time and find a way to signal for help without putting Emma in greater danger. "Fine," he said. "Let's get this over with." Catherine gestured for him to move toward his study, keeping the gun trained on him. As they walked through the house, Marcus looked for any sign of James's team, but saw nothing. Either they were very well hidden, or something had gone wrong with their plan. In his study, Catherine directed him to his computer while she positioned herself where she could watch both him and the door. Marcus's hands shook as he accessed his banking systems, not from fear for himself, but from worry about Emma. "The first transfer," Catherine said, providing him with account information. $50 million, as we discussed." Marcus began the process, moving slowly and deliberately. Each security protocol required several minutes to complete, and he hoped the delay would give James time to act. But as the minutes passed with no sign of rescue, Marcus realized he might be on his own. "You know this won't end here," Marcus said as he worked. "Even if you get the money, you'll never be safe. I have resources you can't imagine, and I'll spend every penny finding you." "I'm counting on it," Catherine replied. "The hunt will be part of the fun. But first, you need to understand what it feels like to lose everything you care about." "I already know that feeling," Marcus said quietly. "I lost my parents when I was 12, lost my first business to a fire, lost the woman I loved to cancer. The difference between us is that I didn't let those losses turn me into a monster." "Pretty words," Catherine said dismissively. "But they won't save you or your precious little girl." As Marcus continued working on the transfer, he noticed something that gave him hope. The security system on his computer was designed to alert James's team to any unusual financial activity. Even if they couldn't communicate directly, they would know something was wrong as soon as the transfer began processing. "Transfer complete," Marcus announced, though he had actually only initiated the first stage of the process. The system would require additional authorization before any money actually moved, buying him more time. "Excellent," Catherine said. Now the property transfer. As Marcus began accessing the real estate documents, he heard a sound that made his heart skip, Emma's voice, calling his name from somewhere upstairs. She sounded frightened, and the sound galvanized him into action. "Emma," he called back, starting toward the door. Catherine swung the gun toward him, but Marcus was beyond caring about his own safety. He had to get to Emma, no matter the cost. The shot rang out just as James and his team burst through the windows and doors simultaneously. Marcus felt a burning sensation in his shoulder, but kept moving toward the stairs. Behind him, he could hear shouts and the sounds of a struggle, but his only focus was reaching Emma. He found her in her room, unharmed but terrified, with a man in dark clothing standing over her. The man turned as Marcus entered, reaching for a weapon, but Marcus was faster. Years of protective instincts and adrenaline gave him strength he didn't know he possessed, and he tackled the intruder before he could draw his gun. The fight was brief but violent. Marcus was motivated by a father's desperate love, while his opponent was just doing a job. When James and his team reached the room moments later, they found Marcus holding the unconscious intruder while Emma clung to his uninjured arm. "Are you hurt, sweetheart?" Marcus asked, ignoring his own wound as he examined Emma for any signs of harm. "I'm okay," Emma said, though she was shaking. "He said he was going to take me away, but I told him you wouldn't let that happen. I knew you'd come for me." Marcus held her close, feeling tears of relief and residual fear streaming down his face. The trust in her voice, her absolute faith that he would protect her, was both humbling and empowering. "I'll always come for you," he whispered into her hair. "Always." James appeared in the doorway, looking relieved to find them both alive. "Catherine is in custody, and we've rounded up 2 other accomplices on the property. The police are on their way." "How did they get past your security?" Marcus asked. "They've been planning this for months," James explained. "They knew our protocols better than we did. Catherine had been feeding them information about our security measures since she started working here." Over the next several hours, the full scope of the plot became clear. Catherine and her associates had planned to kidnap Emma and hold her for ransom, using the child as leverage to force Marcus to transfer not just money, but control of several key business assets. The Riverside property was just the beginning. They had intended to systematically strip him of everything he had built. The police investigation revealed that Dmitry Volkov had indeed died of a heart attack, but his financial troubles had been largely self-inflicted. His company had been poorly managed and over-leveraged long before the Riverside deal. Marcus's successful bid had simply been the final straw in a series of bad business decisions. Catherine, consumed by grief and unable to accept her father's responsibility for his own downfall, had fixated on Marcus as the cause of all their family's problems. She had spent months planning her revenge, studying his routines, his business practices, and most importantly, his relationship with Emma. "She knew that threatening you directly wouldn't be enough," the detective explained to Marcus during his statement. "But she understood that threatening Emma would make you do anything she wanted." Marcus nodded, understanding the psychology even if he couldn't comprehend the cruelty. Emma had become the most important thing in his world, and anyone who wanted to hurt him would naturally target her. In the days that followed, Marcus made several important decisions. First, he upgraded his security systems and hired additional personnel to ensure that nothing like this could happen again. Second, he began the process of legally adopting Emma, making their family bond official in the eyes of the law. But most importantly, he realized that his wealth and success meant nothing if they couldn't protect the people he loved. He began restructuring his business operations to allow him more time at home, more opportunities to be the father Emma deserved. Emma, for her part, showed remarkable resilience in the aftermath of the ordeal. She had nightmares for a few weeks, but with the help of a counselor and Marcus's constant reassurance, she gradually returned to her normal, cheerful self. "Marcus," she said one morning about a month after the incident, as they sat together at breakfast. "I'm glad I told you about the keys." "So am I, sweetheart," Marcus replied, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "You were very brave, and you probably saved both our lives." "Will bad people try to hurt us again?" Emma asked, a question that had been troubling her despite the counselor's reassurances. Marcus considered his answer carefully. He didn't want to frighten her, but he also didn't want to lie about the realities of their situation. "There might always be people who want to hurt successful people like us," he said finally. but I promise you that I'll never let anyone harm you. We have good people protecting us now, and we're much smarter about who we trust." Like James, Emma said, brightening. She had developed a case of hero worship for the security chief who had helped rescue them. Exactly like James, Marcus agreed. And like Mrs. Patterson. Mrs. Patterson was their new housekeeper, a grandmother of 6 who had been thoroughly vetted by James's team. She was warm and loving with Emma, but also alert to any potential security concerns. The balance between normal family life and necessary precautions was delicate, but they were learning to navigate it together. Catherine Volkov was sentenced to 15 years in prison for kidnapping, armed robbery, and conspiracy charges. Her accomplices received similar sentences, and the entire network that had supported their operation was dismantled by federal investigators. During the trial, Marcus felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness as he watched Catherine receive her sentence. Justice had been served, but he couldn't help thinking about the waste of it all. A brilliant woman had destroyed her life pursuing revenge for imagined wrongs, leaving nothing but pain in her wake. "Do you forgive her?" Emma asked him one evening as they discussed the trial's conclusion. It was a profound question from an 8-year-old, and Marcus took time to consider his answer. "I forgive her for being hurt and angry about her father's death," he said finally. "But I can't forgive her for trying to hurt you. Some things are unforgivable, Emma, and threatening children is one of them." Emma nodded solemnly, seeming to understand the distinction. "I hope she learns to be better in prison." Marcus smiled at her generous spirit. Even after everything Catherine had put them through, Emma could still hope for her redemption. It was a reminder of why protecting her innocence was so important, why her safety was worth any sacrifice. As months passed, life at the Whitmore estate settled into a new normal. The security measures became routine rather than intrusive, and Emma adapted to the changes with the flexibility of childhood. She made friends with some of the security team's children, turning what could have been an isolating situation into an opportunity for expanded social connections. Marcus found that the experience had changed him in fundamental ways. His priorities had been clarified in the starkest possible terms, and he no longer had any doubt about what mattered most in his life. Business success was important, but Emma's happiness and safety trumped everything else. He also developed a deeper appreciation for the people who worked to keep them safe. James and his team weren't just employees. They were extended family members who shared in the responsibility of protecting Emma. The trust required for such an arrangement was profound, and Marcus didn't take it lightly. One evening, as Marcus was tucking Emma into bed, she surprised him with a question that showed how much she had grown from the experience. "Marcus, when I grow up, will I have to worry about bad people trying to hurt me because I'm rich?" It was a sobering question, one that forced Marcus to confront the long-term implications of their wealth and the responsibilities it would place on Emma's shoulders. "Possibly," he answered honestly. "But by then, you'll be smart and strong enough to protect yourself. And you'll have people who love you helping to keep you safe. Will you teach me how to be safe?" Emma asked. "I'll teach you everything I know," Marcus promised. "About business, about people, about making good decisions. When you're older, you'll be able to take care of yourself and help take care of others too." Emma smiled, satisfied with his answer. "I want to help other kids who don't have daddies like you." Marcus felt his heart swell with pride. Despite everything she had been through, Emma's first instinct was still to help others. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew she would face them with courage and compassion. As he turned off her light and closed her door, Marcus reflected on how much their lives had changed since that morning when Emma had warned him about the keys. The danger had been real and terrifying, but it had also brought them closer together and clarified what truly mattered. Walking down the hallway toward his own room, Marcus passed the portraits of previous owners of the estate, men who had built fortunes and left legacies of varying worth. He wondered what his own legacy would be, what people would remember about Marcus Whitmore after he was gone. If he was remembered only as a successful businessman, that would be a failure. But if he was remembered as the man who gave Emma the love, security, and guidance she needed to become an extraordinary woman, then his life would have been worthwhile. The keys that had started this entire ordeal had been recovered and now sat in a secure safe, along with backup copies and additional security measures. But Marcus had learned that the most important things in life couldn't be locked away or protected by security systems. Love, trust, and family bonds were both more fragile and more resilient than any physical treasure. Emma's warning about the keys had saved them both, but more than that, it had demonstrated the strength of their relationship. She had trusted him enough to share her concerns, and he had trusted her observations enough to act on them. That mutual trust had literally saved their lives. As Marcus prepared for bed, he thought about the future. There would be other challenges, other threats, other people who might try to use Emma to get to him. But he was no longer the naive man who had hired Catherine without proper vetting. He was wiser, more cautious, and absolutely committed to protecting the child who had become the center of his world. The next morning brought sunshine streaming through the windows and the sound of Emma's laughter echoing through the halls. She was playing with Mrs. Patterson's granddaughter, who had come for a visit, and their joy was infectious. Marcus stood in the doorway of the playroom, watching them build an elaborate castle out of blocks, and felt a peace he had never known before. This was what mattered. Not the money in his accounts or the properties in his portfolio, but the sound of a child's laughter and the knowledge that she was safe, loved, and free to dream about castles and fairy tales. Emma looked up and saw him watching, her face lighting up with the smile that never failed to melt his heart. "Marcus, come help us build the tower," she called out. "It needs to be really tall so the princess can see everything from her window." Marcus joined them on the floor, his expensive suit forgotten as he helped construct their imaginary fortress. As they worked together, he thought about towers and princesses, about protection and dreams, about the delicate balance between keeping someone safe and letting them soar. Emma's tower would be tall enough for her to see the whole world, but strong enough to keep her secure. That was his job as her father, to give her both wings and roots, both freedom and protection. The keys that had nearly destroyed their lives had ultimately made them stronger. They had learned who they could trust, what they were willing to fight for, and how much they meant to each other. In the end, those were the most valuable treasures of all. As Emma placed the final block on top of their tower, she looked at Marcus with satisfaction. "Perfect," she declared. "Now the princess is safe, and she can see everything beautiful in the world." Marcus smiled, thinking that Emma had just described exactly what he wanted for her future. Safety and beauty, security and wonder, protection and possibility. It was a tall order, but then again, they had just built a very tall tower. The keys were secure, the threats were neutralized, and the future stretched ahead of them full of promise. Whatever challenges came next, they would face them together, father and daughter, protected by love and strengthened by trust. Emma's warning about the keys had been the beginning of their ordeal, but it had also been the foundation of their salvation. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important messages, and sometimes the greatest treasures are the ones that can't be locked away.